The revolving glass doors of Vertex Technologies whispered shut behind Sarah Miller as she stepped into the cavernous lobby, her hand wrapped firmly around the smaller one of her daughter. The marble floors gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights, reflecting the towering walls of glass and steel that rose around them like a cathedral to modern ambition. For most, this building represented opportunity, progress, and innovation. For Sarah, it was survival. Her shoulders ached, every movement reminding her of the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that had gnawed away at her strength these past months. Tonight, however, the pain had to be ignored. She couldn't afford to show weakness not on her first night. With rent overdue and medical bills stacked like bricks against her chest, losing this job was not an option. At her side, Lily walked with surprising steadiness for a 6-year-old who had never seen the world around her. Her white cane tapped lightly against the polished floor, but she relied less on the stick than on her uncanny awareness. She tilted her head slightly as if listening to the hum of the building itself, her soft blonde curls catching the light. The pink backpack on her shoulders bulged with braille books. A stuffed rabbit with one ear bent at an awkward angle peeking out from the zipper. "Stay close." "Sweet pea," Sarah murmured. "I am," Lily replied, her voice calm and certain. Her clouded blue eyes, though sightless, seemed to fix unerringly on her mother's face. The security guard at the desk frowned as they approached. He was broad-shouldered, his uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am," he said, his gaze dropping to Lily. "Children aren't allowed in the building after hours." Sarah's stomach clenched. She had practiced her explanation all the way on the bus. "Please, sir, it's just for tonight. My babysitter canceled at the last minute, and I couldn't afford to miss this shift. My daughter is very quiet. She'll stay in the break room while I work." The guard's eyes softened briefly as he looked at Lily, who stood straight-backed and polite, her rabbit clutched under one arm. "One night only," he said after a long pause, "but keep her with you at all times." Relief loosened the knot in Sarah's chest. She murmured her thanks and guided Lily toward the elevators, whispering reassurance as they rose to the 42nd floor. The air was different up here, cleaner, colder, humming with the distant pulse of machines. Sarah found the supply closet where her uniform waited, but before she could take a breath, the click of sharp heels echoed down the hallway. Mrs. Vaughn, the night supervisor, appeared like a hawk sweeping down on its prey. Her face was stern, lips pressed in a thin line. "Who is this?" she demanded, her finger pointing toward Lily. "My daughter," Sarah admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, my sitter canceled." "And absolutely not," Mrs. Vaughn cut in. "Company policy forbids bringing family members here, especially children. This is a secure environment." "Please," Sarah begged, her throat tightening. "It's just for tonight. She'll sit quietly in the break room. She won't touch anything." Mrs. Vaughn's expression hardened further. "This isn't negotiable. I'll have to report this to management." Without another word, she turned and marched down the hall. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, blinking back tears. "It's not your fault, Lily," she whispered. "I know," Lily said softly. She cocked her head again, listening. "Mommy, do you hear that?" "Hear what?" "The buzzing," Lily said. "It's everywhere like my tablet when it gets an error, but louder. And it's not steady, it's wrong." Sarah frowned. All she heard was the faint thrum of the building's systems. But Lily's small face was intent, her fingers tightening around her rabbit. Sarah hugged her daughter close, fighting the sinking feeling that the night was already slipping out of control. Somewhere deep in the building, a machine beeped faintly, almost lost beneath the silence. Lily tilted her head again, listening to what no one else could hear. The fluorescent lights in the HR corridor buzzed faintly, throwing long shadows across the polished floor. Sarah's footsteps echoed to loud in her own ears as she held Lily's hand tighter than ever. Mrs. Vaughn strode several paces ahead, her sharp heels clicking like a metronome of doom. Each step sounded like the ticking of a clock running out of time. "Wait here," Vaughn snapped, pointing to 2 chairs outside a heavy oak door. "Mr. Patterson will see you shortly." Without waiting for acknowledgement, she swept into the office, her silhouette swallowed by the light inside. Sarah sank into the chair, her body heavy, the smell of lemon cleaner clinging to her hands from the few minutes of work she'd managed. Before disaster struck, her chest felt like a vice was closing in. She had fought so hard for this job, endured sleepless nights and relentless pain, and now she was about to lose it before it even began. Next to her, Lily sat calmly, her pink backpack perched neatly on her lap. Her small fingers traced the seam of her stuffed rabbit's worn fabric ear, her unseeing eyes shifting as though following some sound Sarah couldn't detect. "Mom," Lily whispered, "are you in trouble because of me?" The words cut deeper than anything Mrs. Vaughn had said. Sarah forced a smile, brushing her daughter's hair back from her face. "No, sweetie, it's not your fault. Everything will be okay." But she knew nothing was okay. The office door creaked open and a balding man in his 50s appeared. He wore a tie slightly loosened at the collar and glasses that magnified his weary eyes. "Miss Miller," he said, voice clipped but not unkind, "please step inside, alone." Sarah hesitated, glancing at Lily. "I'll be fine," Lily said quietly, sliding her headphones from her backpack. "I'll wait right here." Reluctantly, Sarah entered the office. The door shut behind her with a dull thud, leaving Lily alone in the corridor. For a moment, all was still. Then Lily tilted her head. The headphones hovered in her hands, unused. There was that sound again, the strange, insistent buzzing she'd noticed earlier. It pulsed faintly at first, like a heart out of rhythm, then quickened into erratic staccato bursts. To anyone else, it was white noise. To Lily, it was a language. She tapped her tablet awake, fingers flying across the screen with practiced confidence. The device began to translate the electromagnetic signals into sound, a feature she had once discovered by accident, but now used like a second form of sight. Notes spilled into her ears through the headphones, sharp and discordant. The building itself was screaming. Inside the office, Mr. Patterson wasted no time. "Miss Miller, I'm afraid your employment is being terminated, effective immediately." Sarah's breath caught. "Please, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain. Company policy is clear. Unauthorized individuals, especially minors, cannot be brought into this facility. We handle sensitive information here. The risks." "She's just a child," Sarah interrupted, desperation sharpening her voice. "A blind child who would have sat quietly in the break room. I had no other choice tonight. Please, I need this job." For the briefest moment, Patterson's face softened, his eyes flicking to the photo frame on his desk, a smiling boy in a baseball uniform. "I sympathize," he said quietly, "but rules are rules. You'll be paid for tonight. That will be all." Sarah felt the world tilt around her. The chair pressed against her back like a wall closing in. She had nothing left. Outside, Lily was no longer tracing her rabbit's ear. She was listening intently, her head turning slightly as though the sounds were bouncing off the walls. She hummed under her breath, mimicking the strange rhythms the building was making. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The lights overhead flickered once, twice. A low alarm sounded far away, almost uncertain of itself, like a throat clearing before a scream. Footsteps thundered in the distance, executives rushing through corridors, voices urgent and panicked. Lily pressed her headphones tighter against her ears. The melody of chaos was unmistakable now, patterns clashing, spirals collapsing, the digital equivalent of fevered delirium. "The building is sick," she whispered to herself when Sarah stumbled back into the hallway. Her eyes red, she found her daughter sitting straight, her face set in eerie concentration. "Mom," Lily said, gripping her tablet, "something's happening. The buzzing is getting worse, like when a virus makes your body hot and shaky. Only this is inside the computers." Alarms flared suddenly, louder this time. Red strobes lit the corridor. Mr. Patterson's phone rang sharply in his office, his voice muffled but urgent as he barked into the receiver. Sarah grabbed Lily's hand. "We need to go," she said, panic rising in her chest. But Lily resisted. "No, Mom, wait, I can hear it. The bad code has a pattern and patterns can be broken." Her words hung in the charged air just as the elevators at the end of the hall slid open. A group of executives spilled out, their faces pale, led by a distinguished man with silver hair and tired eyes. Sarah recognized him instantly. Richard Hammond, the CEO. His voice boomed above the chaos. "The server room is this way. Amber says we have less than 30 minutes before the last firewall falls." And for the first time that night, Sarah realized the danger wasn't just about her job. It was about the entire company and maybe much more. Asterisk on the 44th floor. The walls of the executive boardroom seemed to close in. The giant screen at the front flickered red warnings across its surface, error messages crawling like blood through veins. Richard Hammond stood at the head of the long mahogany table, his suit jacket discarded, his tie loose, sweat gathering at his temples. He had weathered market crashes, hostile takeovers, and sleepless decades of building Vertex from nothing. But never had he seen fear spread across his boardroom like this. Amber Chen's fingers danced across her keyboard. Her eyes locked on streams of incomprehensible code cascading down the screen. She was usually unflappable, her brilliance rivaled only by her composure. Tonight, though, her voice cracked. They're inside the second firewall. This isn't just brute force, they're adapting in real time. Every protocol we throw at them, they mutate around it. How long? Richard's voice was steel, but the strain in his jaw betrayed him. An hour at most before they reached the core server. If they get through, every client account, every patent, every financial reserve, it's gone. The executive shifted uneasily. $8 billion, perhaps more, evaporating into the digital void. And worse than the money, reputation. One breach of this scale and Vertex Technologies would collapse under lawsuits and shattered trust. 30 years of empire building undone in a single night. Richard slammed his fist against the table. Bring in everyone. I don't care if they're asleep, at home, or halfway across the globe. I want every top engineer here now. Amber hesitated, her fingers still flying. We don't have time to gather them all. Richard's eyes darkened. Then find me a miracle. Outside that fortified boardroom, chaos began to ripple downward. Sirens wailed faintly through the ventilation system. Employees, janitors, interns, mid-level managers still burning the midnight oil spilled in the hallways, bewildered, clutching phones that displayed the same pulsing red message, security breach detected. And 2 floors below, a 6-year-old girl sat quietly on the floor, headphones pressed to her ears, humming along to the song of the building's collapse. Lily's lips moved in rhythm with the discordant sounds only she could translate. To anyone else, the attack was invisible, a silent war of firewalls and encryptions. But to her, it was deafening. Patterns spiraled in jagged melodies, looping, breaking, reforming. A virus with claws, gnashing against the defenses of a digital giant. Her small hands hovered over her tablet. It wasn't a toy anymore, it was a translator, a gateway. Notes spilled from its speakers, chaotic yet strangely organized, as though the building itself were pleading for help. She tilted her head, her face tightening. They're trying to trick it, she whispered, more to herself than to her mother. Like when you tell a lie inside a lie so people can't find the truth. But I can still hear it. The real one, the bad one. Sarah crouched beside her, torn between awe and terror. Alarms blared louder now, and the crowd rushing past them thickened. Sweetheart, we have to leave. It's not safe here. But Lily shook her head, curls bouncing. Mom, if they don't stop this, everything in this building will die. I can hear it breaking, like glass cracking. You can't see it, but it's real. Before Sarah could respond, a wave of executives thundered down the corridor. At their center, Richard Hammond's tall figure cut through the chaos. His presence both commanding and desperate. His sharp eyes fell briefly on Sarah and the child at her side. But he had no time for stragglers. The server room is this way, Amber urged, her phone pressed to her ear, barking orders to her scatter team. And then Lily's voice rang out, small but piercing, cutting through the noise. Excuse me. The group froze. Hammond turned, irritation flickering across his face at the interruption. But before he could dismiss her, Lily spoke again, her words precise and uncanny. It's not just one program, she said, her sightless eyes fixed somewhere beyond them, her tiny hands clutching the tablet. It's 2. One hides inside the other, but the second one hums wrong. It skips every 7 beats. That's where it's weak. Amber froze mid-step, color draining from her face. Slowly, she lowered her phone. What did you just say? The virus, Lily answered, as if it were obvious. It has a song. It's almost pretty if you don't listen close. But I listen close. The broken part is the part that matters. For the first time all night, Amber faltered. The exact phrase Lily used every 7 beats was a detail. She had only whispered minutes earlier to her assistant. Not even Hammond had heard it. And yet this child had described it perfectly. Sarah pulled her daughter close, expecting ridicule, dismissal, or worse. Instead, Amber crouched, her voice low and urgent. How do you know that? I hear it, Lily said simply. Like music. I can follow it. If I follow it long enough, I can stop it. Richard Hammond's gaze sharpened, his chest rising and falling as he studied the small, blind girl clutching a rabbit and a tablet. In her innocent confidence, he caught something he hadn't felt all night: hope. And for the first time since the alarms began, the CEO of Vertex Technologies considered the impossible. That salvation might not come from the most brilliant minds in Silicon Valley, but from a little girl who saw the world in sound. The server room was a fortress within the skyscraper, sealed behind double steel doors that hissed when opened. Rows upon rows of humming black towers stretched into the distance, their blinking lights casting eerie glows across the polished floor. It wasn't just a room. It was the pulsing heart of Vertex Technologies, the vault of secrets and power that kept the billion-dollar empire alive. Richard Hammond entered first, his broad shoulders stiff with authority and tension. Amber Chen followed at his side, her hands a blur on her tablet as she coordinated engineers already inside, their voices urgent, echoing against the hum of machines. Behind them, Sarah hesitated at the threshold, clutching Lily's hand. "This is no place for a child," Hammond said sharply, turning to block their way. His eyes were steel. "Get her out of here." Sarah's voice trembled, but did not break. "Please, Mr. Hammond, just listen to her. She's not like other children. She's a liability," he cut in, his patience threadbare. "We don't have time for every 7 beats," Lily said, her small voice carrying like a bell across the cold room. Amber froze mid-step. Engineers looked up from their screens, startled. Hammond's brow furrowed, the words stabbing into his already frayed composure. Lily adjusted her headphones, tilting her head, and continued calmly. "The bad code stutters," she explained. "It pretends to be smooth, but it skips. Like when a song on the radio glitches. That's where it's hiding. That's where you can break it." Amber stepped closer, her face pale. "That's exactly what I saw," she whispered. "I didn't even tell anyone yet." "How could she?" Hammond turned on her. "You're saying this child. I'm saying she sees something we can't," Amber interrupted, her eyes fixed on Lily. "And if she's right, we'd be fools not to let her try." The engineers muttered among themselves, disbelief mixing with desperate curiosity. Sarah's arms tightened around her daughter. "She doesn't just guess," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "She's been like this since she was little. She hears patterns no one else can. Please give her a chance." Hammond's jaw clenched. His empire was seconds from bleeding out. Desperation wrestled with logic in his mind until finally he snapped, "Fine, 1 chance. But if this fails, you're out of here. Both of you." Amber hurried Lily to a vacant console, clearing the chair. Sarah hovered behind, her heart hammering. Lily climbed up, the chair too big for her small frame, and placed her tablet beside the keyboard. Almost instantly, her face changed. Her head swayed slightly as though she were listening to music only she could hear. The attack was loud in her world, shrieking notes twisting against the steady hum of the servers. Her tiny fingers tapped on the desk in rhythm, counterbeats forming under her breath. Amber leaned close. "What do you hear?" "It's like a monster with 2 voices," Lily said softly. "One sings a pretty song so you don't notice the other one underneath. But the ugly one always skips. 7 beats. 7 beats. Over and over. If I play the right song back, I can make it trip over itself." The engineers exchanged uneasy glances. Some shook their heads, unable to fathom what they were witnessing. Hammond paced like a caged animal, torn between hope and disbelief. Sarah watched her daughter with both awe and terror. Lily was so small, so fragile, and yet her posture radiated a strange certainty, as though the chaos of the digital storm belonged to her alone. Then the alarms blared louder. Amber's screen flashed an urgent countdown. They had breached the final firewall. 2 minutes before they hit the vault. The room erupted into shouting. Engineers scrambled, Hammond barked orders, and Amber's hands shook as she tried to deploy defenses. That evaporated as quickly as she wrote them, but Lily remained still. Eyes closed, her fingers dancing over her tablet in gentle taps. Her headphones translated the digital chaos into broken notes, and she hummed quietly, weaving counter melodies. Then suddenly she struck a sequence of keys, her small hands moving with eerie precision. The server towers responded instantly. Their lights flickered erratically, like a heartbeat faltering. The attack wavered. "What is she doing?" One engineer gasped. "She's redirecting it," Amber whispered, her eyes wide, "using its own rhythm against itself, like turning a trap inside out." The seconds on the countdown drained away. 1:43, 1:12, 0:49. Sweat rolled down Hammond's temple as he gripped the back of a chair. Watching in silence. At 0:30, the main screen flickered. Red code clashed with sudden streams of white. Lily's counter pattern flooding the system, like light-piercing shadow. Then, with a sound like a sigh, the alarms cut off. The countdown vanished. The room plunged into stunned silence, broken only by the hum of servers returning to their steady, calm rhythm. Amber exhaled, collapsing into her chair. The engineers gaped. Hammond stared at the blind child at the console, her stuffed rabbit tucked beside her tablet, her small hands folded in her lap as if she'd just finished a school assignment. Sarah's tears finally spilled. Lily turned her face toward the room, her unseeing eyes strangely serene. "It stopped," she said simply. "The building feels better now, and for the first time all night." Richard Hammond, the man who had built an empire from nothing, felt something strange surge in his chest. Gratitude not to his board, not to his engineers, but to the child who had just saved his life's work. Asterisk outside the skyscraper. The night air vibrated with chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, flashing red and blue against glass walls that just minutes earlier had gleamed like a monument to progress. The sidewalks teemed with employees streaming from the exits, their chatter urgent, panicked. A rumor spread through the crowd like wildfire. Vertex was under attack. Some whispered it was terrorists, others swore it was a systems meltdown, but no one knew the truth. In the swirl of fear and confusion, buses idled along the curb, headlights cutting through the dark. Drivers leaned on their horns to hurry the evacuations, but only one sat calm and steady behind the wheel, a gray-haired man in a worn cap and pressed uniform, his name stitched neatly on his chest. Alvarez. He had been a bus driver for decades. Through blizzards and riots, blackouts and brownouts, nothing rattled him anymore, or so he thought. Tonight, as the Vertex tower pulsed with strange flickers of light, he felt something in his gut he hadn't felt since his years in uniform. The prickle of an unseen enemy pressing close. He tapped the dashboard once, twice, listening. The vibrations of the engine told him everything, every shudder, every hesitation, every misbeat. He'd once survived ambushes by listening not with his eyes, but with his ears, detecting patterns in the dark when others couldn't. And when his gaze drifted to the crowd spilling from the building, his sharp eyes fell on a small girl who wasn't panicking at all. Lily sat on the curb, her pink backpack at her feet, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. Her headphones covered her ears, but she wasn't lost in play. She sat upright, still, humming under her breath with a focus far beyond her years. Sarah knelt beside her, protected but exhausted, glancing at the exits as though deciding whether to vanish into the night. Before security came looking for them again, Alvarez studied them. Something about the child's humming struck him. It wasn't random. It was patterned. He frowned, leaning forward to hear better. Then it hit him. The cadence of her hum matched the strange flicker of the lights in the skyscraper behind her. Perfectly. He climbed down from the bus and crossed the sidewalk. "Evening," he said, his voice low, steady. Sarah stiffened immediately, pulling Lily closer. "We're fine," she said quickly. "We don't need a ride." But Alvarez wasn't looking at her. His gaze lingered on Lily. "That tune you're humming," he said softly. "It's the same rhythm the tower's lights are blinking, isn't it?" Lily turned her head toward his voice, her blind eyes unerringly finding him. She nodded. "They're sick beats," she said matter-of-factly, like an engine misfiring. Every 7 thump skips, Alvarez's chest tightened. She was describing it the way he'd once described faulty chopper engines to his crew, back when listening meant life or death. Sarah blinked. You understand her?" The old driver crouched, resting his elbows on his knees, his eyes level with Lily's. "I don't know what's happening inside that tower," he admitted, "but I know this. When the world doesn't make sense, you trust the ones who can hear what others can't." He glanced back at the bus, then at the executives rushing in circles, arguing about containment plans. "And I think your girl's hearing what none of them ever will." Lily tilted her head again. "It isn't finished. The bad music is still playing inside. They think it stopped, but I can still hear it scratching. If it comes back stronger, the whole building could fall." Sarah's heart lurched. "Lily," Alvarez held up a hand. His eyes, once dulled by years of routine, now sharpened with the fire of a soldier remembering his battlefield. "I believe her." From the steps above, Richard Hammond appeared, his face tight with strain. Amber Chen trailed behind him, whispering urgently into her phone. The crowd hushed as they descended toward the waiting cars, executives swarming around like bodyguards. This was Sarah's chance to disappear, to slip away before Hammond remembered the janitor's daughter who'd broken protocol. But Lily stood suddenly, clutching her rabbit and her tablet. "Mr. Alvarez," she said, tugging the driver's sleeve. "Help me go back inside. I can't leave yet." "The sick song isn't over," Sarah gasped, horrified. "No, absolutely not. You've done enough already." Hammond's voice boomed across the crowd as though fate itself had heard Lily's plea. "We've stabilized for now, but this isn't over. Our systems are showing shadows, something still embedded, waiting." He ground his teeth, shaking his head. "If it triggers again, it'll hit harder. We may not stop it next time." Alvarez's gaze flicked between Hammond's grim announcement and the blind girl at his side. Slowly, he bent down, his voice steady, commanding, the way it had been when calming terrified men in the field. "Then you'd better let her back in, sir," he said. "Because she already did what none of your geniuses could." Hammond froze, his eyes narrowing at the bus driver, then shifting to Lily. The child stood unflinching, her headphones gleaming in the flashing lights, her face serene in the chaos. The crowd murmured. Some scoffed, others leaned in, drawn to the possibility. For the first time, Sarah realized her daughter's quiet gift was no longer invisible. The world was beginning to notice. The server room breathed like a beast in the dark. The rows of machines glowed with eerie pulses of light, blue and red weaving through cables like veins. The hum was steady for now, but beneath it Lily could hear something restless, something waiting. Richard Hammond stood rigid at the threshold. His executives fanned out behind him, their suits wrinkled, their faces pale. Amber Chen was already at the main console, her eyes darting across streams of code. She looked up at Hammond and shook her head. "It's back, buried deeper this time. They've nested the virus into the system's operating kernel. It's feeding off the servers themselves." A ripple of dread passed through the room. This wasn't just sabotage anymore, it was possession. "Kill the power," one executive said, "and cripple half the country's clients who rely on us." Hammond snapped. "That's financial suicide. Then tell me what miracle you got left," another growled. Before Hammond could reply, Lily stepped forward. She looked impossibly small against the towering server racks, her pink backpack bouncing lightly, her stuffed rabbit's ear flopping against her side. Sarah tried to hold her back, but Alvarez, the bus driver, placed a firm, reassuring hand on the mother's shoulder. "Let her try," he said. The room fell uncomfortably silent. Executives exchanged incredulous looks. Hammond's lips pressed into a grim line, but Amber surprised them all by crouching next to Lily. "Can you still hear it?" Amber asked softly. Lily nodded. "It's louder now, angrier, like when a lion gets hurt and growls deeper so you won't know it's weak." Amber's throat tightened. That was exactly what the data showed. The virus was thrashing violently, masking its vulnerabilities with noise. Sarah crouched in front of her daughter, her voice trembling. "Baby, you don't have to do this. You already saved them once." Lily touched her mother's face gently, her unseeing eyes somehow finding hers. "I want to, Mommy. I don't like when things break. I can fix this one." The words were soft, but in the tense stillness of the server room, they carried more weight than Hammond's commands. Amber guided Lily to the console, sliding aside to give her access. Engineers muttered protests, but Hammond silenced them with a glare. The CEO of Vertex Technologies had built his empire on risk. Tonight, he was betting it all on a blind child. Lily placed her headphones on, tablet open beside the blinking monitors. She closed her eyes and leaned into the sound. Immediately, her small frame stiffened. "It's not one monster anymore," she whispered. "It's split. Two voices, arguing. One is loud and wild. The other is quiet, but sharp. The sharp one is the real danger. It hides in the quiet." Amber's eyes widened. "That's exactly right." The countdown began again on the screen. 5 o'clock until system override. Panic rippled through the room. Hammond's knuckles widened on the back of a chair. Sarah's nails dug into her palms until they drew blood. Alvarez stood tall behind them all, watching the girl with the calm faith of a soldier who had seen miracles born in desperation. Lily's fingers danced across her tablet. The device began translating the digital storm into notes, jagged and piercing. She hummed under her breath, weaving a counter melody. The virus lashed back, the servers flickering violently as though recoiling from her intrusion. The screen glitched. Red streaks poured across it like blood vessels bursting. The timer ticked. 3:29, 3:28, 3:27. "She's antagonizing it," an engineer whispered in awe. "No," Alvarez murmured. "She's baiting it, drawing it out." Indeed, Lily leaned forward, humming louder, her small hands tapping in deliberate counterbeats. The quiet, sharp voice of the virus shrieked into clarity, an invisible predator exposed. Lily's head tilted. "I've got you now," she said softly. She struck a final sequence, her fingers surprisingly sure, and the console erupted in flashing light. The virus fought violently, surging into every available circuit, trying to consume everything. The server shook as though alive. Sarah gasped, reaching for her daughter. "Wait," Amber cried. "She's forcing it into a corner." The countdown plunged. 1 o'clock, 0:59, 0:58. Sweat dripped down Hammond's brow. The air vibrated with static, the room stinking of ozone. Lily hummed louder, her song haunting and strange, clashing perfectly against the virus's rhythm. 0:20, 0:19, 0:18. Then dash silence. The screens went black. Every light in the room extinguished at once. For 3 seconds, the world seemed to stop. Then, one by one, the servers blinked back to life, steady, calm, uncorrupted. The main screen lit up, a single message glowing in white letters: "Intrusion blocked." The engineers collapsed into chairs, stunned. Amber covered her mouth, eyes wet with relief. Hammond exhaled a shuddering breath, staring at the little girl who sat quietly at the console, headphones sliding off her ears, rabbit in her lap. Lily smiled faintly. "It's gone now. The building feels better." Like the fever broke, Sarah sank to her knees, sobbing into her daughter's small hands. Alvarez's weathered face broke into the faintest smile, and Richard Hammond, a man who had spent 30 years trusting only his own judgment, realized his entire empire had just been saved not by money, not by power, but by a child who had seen without seeing, heard without listening, and tamed a beast no one else could touch. The city slept uneasily under the shadow of the Vertex skyscraper. Inside the glass giant, the sirens had finally gone silent, but silence didn't mean safety. It was the kind of silence after a storm when everyone stood blinking, half convinced another wave would come. In the server room, relief had turned quickly to strategy. Richard Hammond barked orders, Amber Chen compiled reports. Engineers whispered in disbelief at what had just transpired. Sarah held Lily close, rocking her gently as if she could shield her daughter from the weight of what had happened. But Lily didn't seem shaken. She sat calmly, her fingers stroking her stuffed rabbit's worn ear. Her face tilted toward the steady hum of the now-healed servers. "She saved us," Amber said finally, her voice breaking the thick quiet. "There's no denying it. We never would have caught that shadow code without her." Hammond's jaw tightened. His mind was a battlefield, gratitude clashing with fear. Gratitude because the company still stood. Fear because the truth, if it escaped, could destroy them in another way. What would shareholders say if they discovered their billion-dollar cyber division had been saved not by world-class engineers, but by a 6-year-old blind girl with a stuffed rabbit? What would rivals do with that kind of ammunition? "No one outside this room needs to know the details," Hammond said finally, his voice like granite. "We'll say it was handled by internal security. That's all." Sarah's head snapped up. "What? Your daughter has a gift," Hammond said carefully. "But this company cannot survive if the world thinks we were defended by a child. We'll give her compensation." Quietly, "But this doesn't leave here." Sarah's face flushed with fury. "You mean to bury the truth? After she saved your empire?" Amber opened her mouth to object, but Hammond silenced her with a glance. "This isn't about fairness. It's about survival." Before Sarah could speak, a low voice cut through the room. "I already told the truth." Everyone turned. At the back of the room stood Alvarez, the bus driver, his weathered hands holding a small, battered camcorder. Its red light blinked steadily. He had recorded everything: Lily's words, her humming countersong, the final triumph. "I've seen cover-ups before," Alvarez said, his voice calm, but edged with steel. "In war, in politics, in business. But you can't bury this one. The world needs to know that hope doesn't always come from the top of the tower. Sometimes it comes from the bottom." Hammond's face went pale. "You'll ruin us." Alvarez shook his head. "No, she saved you. What ruins you is pretending she didn't." Sarah's breath caught. She looked from the driver to her daughter, who sat serenely as though none of the storm around her touched her. Lily turned her head toward Hammond, her unseeing eyes impossibly steady. "I don't want money," she said softly. "I just don't want the building to be sick anymore. It was so innocent, so devastatingly pure, that even the hardened executives fell silent. By dawn, Alvarez's recording had made its way online. At first, it spread in whispers, an anonymous upload titled "The Blind Girl Who Saved a Billion-Dollar Company." But the footage spoke for itself. A small child at a console, humming, tapping, describing the virus in ways no adult could. Her stuffed rabbit perched beside her was the final proof that this wasn't a hoax, it was too strange to true. Within hours, the video had millions of views. News anchors called her the savior of Silicon Valley. Analysts dissected her words with awe. Parents wept watching her steady composure. Children wrote letters to her. And across the world, ordinary people who felt small and invisible saw, for the first time, that sometimes the overlooked could change everything. Inside Vertex, panic turned to surrender. Hammond tried to contain the storm, but the truth moved faster than his lawyers. When reporters demanded comment, he stood before cameras, every line in his face betraying the sleepless night behind him, and said, "Yes, it's true. A little girl saved us, and she taught me that power doesn't always wear a suit." Sarah and Lily stood beside him on that podium. Sarah's hands trembled, but Lily simply smiled faintly, turning her face toward the sound of thousands of cheering voices. "I can't see you," Lily said into the microphone, her voice carrying like a clear bell. "But I can hear you, and I'm glad the bad song is gone." The crowd erupted, cameras flashed, and in that moment, the girl who had walked into Vertex as a liability, a rule broken, became a legend. Not because she was blind, not because she was brilliant, but because when the whole world panicked, she listened closer than anyone else dared. Alvarez watched from the edge of the stage, his cap pulled low, pride softening the lines of his battle-worn face. He knew what he had witnessed wasn't just history, it was a reminder. Sometimes heroes weren't the loudest or the strongest. Sometimes they were the quiet ones, humming a tune no one else could hear. And so the story spread, unstoppable, unforgettable. A child had saved $1 billion empire with nothing but a song.